Happy Friday, everyone. Josh's severe weather. We've got pretty active weather coming, big time cold, and a rare southern snow and ice storm coming next week that's going to cause problems for millions across the United States. And that's not the only storm on the map. We do have one coming across the mid-Atlantic and Northeast later this weekend as well. That's going to cause us some problems. So I expect to see over the coming days several school closings and delays and all kinds of issues as one of our biggest blasts of cold in about 11 years is set to hit the United States. So I appreciate y'all joining me here. These are some of the key messages on the storm coming up early to middle parts of next week. And you can see places that don't typically get snow are at an increasing threat for winter weather. And a pretty good chance this is going to be mostly snow from Texas to the Carolinas and Virginia, although ice will be a problem as well along the Gulf Coast. Maybe from near the Houston area down through New Orleans, all the way over towards Jacksonville, Florida, and maybe all the way up to Savannah and up the East Coast here. So right now, there is uncertainty on exact totals. This is still a few days away, but models have began to kind of hone in on what's likely to happen and where the storm is going to track. And right now, all we got to really worry about are the exact details at this time. Now, if you look at the southern United States today, you'll say, well, what winter storm? It's 72 degrees in Abilene, Texas, and 76 in Brownsville, and 70 in Tampa, and even 60 in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, just wait. It is coming. You can see the beginnings of the cold coming down into the Dakotas. Temperatures there are in the teens. But temperatures are going to be tumbling here over the next 24 to 48 hours, and we're going to see a massive crash coming here in our temperatures. You can see that we do have winter storm warnings in effect over parts of New Mexico, winter storm watches over parts of the Northeast from West Virginia to Massachusetts and southern Vermont, and even a blizzard warning in place over portions of North Dakota and Minnesota as that Arctic front's going to drop south and bring incredibly strong wind with it and temperatures that are going to drop significantly, creating very hazardous weather. So things are about to change significantly here. And you can see on our water vapor image from Tropical Tidbits, here's our first storm system. This is going to track in this direction, and that's what we're going to be watching in the Northeast later this weekend. But behind it, another trough that's going to drop down here and tap into this moisture. And after it turns colder, the moisture starts to run up and over that colder air mass. And that's what's going to set up our potential issues here as we get into the beginning and first half of next week. Here's a look at the shorter term in the southeast. All we're talking about now is rain and a few thunderstorms. We could see a few flakes in the mountains here as the system moves in tomorrow, but primarily rain with a few thunderstorms over the Carolinas, Tennessee, down to Georgia, and all the way down to Louisiana and northern Florida. And that heavy rain is going to make for a nasty day in Orlando on Sunday. So those of you that have plans to travel down there are going to be running into quite a bit of wet weather, especially on Sunday. But notice how our dashed blue lines continue to push southeast. This indicates much colder air that will be following this storm system. So as warm as it is now, we see this low tracking from Texas all the way into the Carolinas. Then we see the cold returning, and then we see another wave of low pressure forming, bringing snowfall up from eastern Tennessee and Kentucky and even the Ohio Valley into portions of the Northeast. And I'm going to pan out and pan back into the Northeast to show you how that exactly works out. And even before that storm gets here, some light snow will be a possibility tomorrow, mainly a wet snow across Ontario, southeast Michigan, northern Ohio, and Indiana into western New York and PA. And it will start out as rain at the lakeshore before that switch over to snow. That's not a big system, but will produce some accumulation as it moves through on Saturday. And we're going to have rain for the coastal plain of Maine Saturday night. But then Sunday, our next piece of energy comes up, and at this point, it's quite a bit colder. And you can see that snow will be making its way up to the Mason-Dixon line in the morning on Sunday, and then moving into the Northeast Sunday afternoon and up into New England Sunday evening. And as it continues to track up the coast, this low pressure system is expected to deepen and strengthen, indicating stronger winds and more cold air getting wrapped into the backside of the system. And you can see by the time we get to midnight Sunday night, early Monday morning, snow rates are going to pick up across parts of Maine and New Brunswick. And this is just from the NAM model. The GFS shows that this could strengthen even a little bit quicker. Here's a look at our potential snow across the Midwest, the north central states, and you'll see by tomorrow at lunchtime, we may see an inch or two of snow across parts of Michigan, maybe up to an inch or so in Indiana and Ohio, locally more around the lake. And then we'll see this system pulling away, but the next system behind it is going to get cranking here with snow falling all the way down maybe into northern Alabama Sunday morning and into western Kentucky. Our best chance for accumulation as we bring this closer to you here, and I'm going to zoom in so that we can see this area a little bit better. Actually, let me back that up to the Tennessee Valley for you here. Sorry about that. We could see that potentially a couple of inches could accumulate on the Cumberland Plateau on Sunday, and even an inch or so across the hills of Kentucky, even more off of Lake Michigan as that cold air pours up and over the lake. But as we switch this eastward, you are going to see that the mountains are going to get in on a bunch of this snow as well here on Sunday afternoon and Sunday night, potentially over 6 inches of accumulation in the Smokies. And in West Virginia, again, we're looking at a few inches of snow. West Virginia can't catch a break. We had such a hot, dry summer, and now we're having snow day after snow day at the schools here. It's just, one extreme to the other here, but we could see locally up to a foot in the ski areas, which would be good for them, of course, not so much for those who have to travel on Monday morning. Now, as we shift this to the north and east, and I'm going to zoom into that in just a little bit, you're going to see the first wave here produces a few inches of snow with it. That's not really a big deal. That's going to be out of here by Sunday morning, but here comes the next wave, and I'm going to show you the 24-hour total to give you a better handle on how much of this could fall. And the NAM begins to start cranking out some heavier rates along the Poconos, along the Catskills, mainly on the mountain ridges here, but 3 to 6 inches seems to be a pretty good bet. And I think some of you in the higher elevations are going to see quite a bit more than that as the cold air pours in and our moisture picks up. Now, this NAM model here stops just after midnight. It's at 1 a.m. on Monday. There will be a little more snow beyond that. And if we take a look at the GFS model, we're going to see even higher amounts here going into Monday afternoon locally. And some of this may not quite total up when it sticks. Some of it may kind of congeal, if that makes sense. But decent potential of 10 inches or more of snow from the West Virginia mountains right on through the Lehigh Valley, Brandywine Valleys, and northern Maryland up into interior parts of New England. And of course, on the actual coastline, amounts are going to be a lot less. And that has been a theme here the last several winters. But if this does end up shifting a little to the right, then I could see how New York City and Boston got 8 or more inches of snow, which would be our biggest total in a while. Right now, the GFS pinpoints that will be mainly north and west of 95 that gets that kind of snowfall, but there's a possibility that this could shift over to the right or left a little bit as it's still a few days away. Now, the Canadian is farther west than the GFS and has most of the snow from northern West Virginia through western Maryland, most of PA, and up into Maine. So you'll see the Canadian's a little bit different than the GFS. It's farther west. The European is weaker, but farther east here with our bullseye for snow. So there's a chance this is still going to shift around quite a bit. For now, though, I think the GFS is a good middle-of-the-road model, and it's possible that the amounts could end up higher in Canada, or they could end up a little bit lower in PA and New York. So again, a pretty significant storm, and one where it is possible in the D.C. area that we may have a few inches of snow on the ground in time for the inauguration on Monday. It's going to be very cold as well. So we're going to have more on that in tomorrow's video as we get some more shorter range models. And NAM starts getting into that range here tomorrow. So I'm going to have another video in the morning talking about that. But I do want to show you what's going on with the temperatures here, dropping southward here. We're going to have snow squalls and very quickly dropping temperatures over the beginning of the weekend here on the front range of the Colorado Rockies across Nebraska and Texas. We're going to go from the 70s today down into the 30s and 40s tomorrow afternoon in central Texas. So things are going to drop off very quickly here, and take a look at what's coming even behind that. Well below zero throughout the day on Sunday. This is dangerous cold for those of us from Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado on into upper Michigan here, and the cold will continue to drop down. And we may have temperatures by Monday morning that are as cold as 30 degrees below zero. So that cold gets all the way down into deep South Texas, all the way down to the Gulf Coast, into northern Florida. We see single digits along the I-70 corridor. Along Interstate 20, we see mid-20s. And on I-10, we will be at or below freezing by Monday morning in many places. Looking at the East Coast, you can see it's a little bit still kind of mild tomorrow, 40s and 50s in the mid-Atlantic region, 60s and 70s in Florida. This is tomorrow afternoon. It starts dropping tomorrow night, and a big drop coming on Sunday. And in the state of North Carolina, for example, on Sunday afternoon, we're in the low 20s in places like Boone and in the mountains of North Carolina, and we're still in the 60s at the coastline. Now, that's not unusual in North Carolina. It's a big enough state, but you see it is coming, and it may be 60 in Wilmington and 32 in Atlanta during the afternoon Sunday before temperatures crash at night. But it's coming down all the way to Central Florida. We're talking 40s and low 50s Monday in Orlando, just a really nasty setup. And what happens after that cold gets here is still looking like it's going to be a problem next week, Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday. Look at this trough that swings through after the cold air mass is already in place. And models are indicating that low pressure is going to track through the southeast and move away on Monday. Then the high pressure drops down, bringing that cold air all the way down on Monday. And then low pressure forms somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico Monday night or Tuesday and jumps to the southeast coast. Now, the pressure is relatively high, but there is upper level support and there's enough moisture in place along that boundary for something interesting to happen. As we get later into the week, that high does retreat, and we may have another opportunity for something to form near the Carolinas and move up the East Coast on Friday. So it may not just be one storm next week, but potentially two. This is the older GFS model. There's a new one that should be coming in soon. You see the low pressure track here bringing heavier snow into the Northeast and New England on Sunday. Then the cold comes down. Then we start to see moisture building across Texas Monday afternoon, mainly in the hill country, but by Monday night, spreading towards Houston and into Louisiana by daybreak on Tuesday. Likely, this is going to shut down schools in Texas, Louisiana, and the Gulf Coast region on Tuesday. I've already seen some closures are likely coming. It's just going to be a nasty cold rain on the coast in Florida, for example. But look at how deep that cold air gets down here Tuesday night. We could see ice all the way down to the Florida Panhandle, even some snow near the Georgia-Alabama line. And then snow starts to spread up into the southeast and the east coast here, all the way up to maybe South Jersey here. Now, this low earlier in the week looked like it might try to come up through eastern North Carolina, meaning more of an ice and rain threat for these eastern parts. It has trended south and it's starting to trend back to the north just a little bit, but right now in an ideal spot to produce some heavy snow as it comes up into the Carolinas and maybe some sleet and freezing rain for the immediate coastline. If it shifts south, we're going to see less snow farther north and west and more ice down into Florida. If it shifts northward, then we could see more mixed precipitation into places like Fayetteville and Greenville, North Carolina, and maybe Columbia. But right now, the models are starting to settle in on what's going to be a pretty easy to find track here with some detail adjustments likely to happen. Canadian model remains snowier and farther north here and has snow all the way up into Tennessee and into Virginia. It has trimmed back the northwestern edge of this, and it does show heavy snow falling across southeast Texas on Tuesday morning, southern Louisiana Tuesday afternoon, Mississippi and Alabama, and even Georgia Tuesday evening. But it keeps the worst of it south of the I-20 corridor. If it shifts any farther north, we need to be more concerned in places like Birmingham, Atlanta, Columbia, even Charlotte and Raleigh. But the Canadian is showing less snow today than it did yesterday in those locations, starting to hone in on what could happen. Now, the European did keep this farther south and limited our moisture. And you can see it still has some limited moisture. It doesn't bring anything up past Birmingham or Montgomery, Alabama, or even past Atlanta. It has kind of the western edge of this near Raleigh and Richmond. So it is not as moist, and it's a little farther south than what that Canadian was certainly showing, and even the GFS was showing. And then the Icon model is even more suppressed with this storm track and really just has snow in Texas and Louisiana, and then kind of scoots by here, and then maybe we have something else later in the week. So there is a new GFS model run coming in. I am going to tease you with it, but I have to move on. So I do want to show you at least how it's starting to trend here. And you can see nothing's going to really happen until Monday afternoon and Monday night. But then it begins to show snow all the way up to the Metroplex and the I-20 corridor. It's got sleet near and north of Houston by Tuesday morning, switching to snow Tuesday afternoon. But you can see the GFS beginning to kind of fall in line more with the European, starting to suppress it a little bit more here. But where it is snowing, it could come down pretty hard here in parts of East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And it's actually showing a layer of ice all the way up to places like Macon, Georgia, Columbia, Florence, South Carolina, and maybe as far north as Pender County in North Carolina. So that's what we're looking at here. I do want to show you ensembles and where the best chance of seeing accumulating snow will fall. This is greater than an inch, and you can see there's a little potential here in the high plains on Monday, but a better chance Monday night and Tuesday, beginning east of San Antonio and stretching across the Houston area, Lake Charles, Lafayette, over to Baton Rouge. It is showing an 80 to 90% chance that you're going to get a snowfall in South Louisiana and South Texas. Now, 3 inches, that possibility is also there. It's about 50 to 60% all the way to the Gulf Coast. 6 inches, though, the chances start to come down quite a bit. It's a lot less likely we're talking a crippling snow, but I grew up in Louisiana. An inch of snow is crippling enough. Any ice makes it worse. So this will be a very substantial storm for this area. Taking a look farther to the east, you will see that chances are still very significant along the I-10 corridor. The orange area indicates 60 to 70% chances of an inch or more of snow in 24 hours in places like Slidell and Gulfport and even New Orleans. And it's also got that 50 to 60% chance all the way up to places like Macon and Warner Robins. Now, the chances do come down when we get into the Piedmont region of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, only about 20 to 30% for Tuesday night and Wednesday. But you can see it is going to pivot up the coast here, and there is still a good chance here. So this could be a coastal snowstorm and much less for the Piedmont. I live in Raleigh. We kind of missed that last one last Friday, about a week ago. It was sleet and freezing rain. How funny would it be if this system just managed to scoot by to our south and east and maybe got you in Joco or in Wilson and Rocky Mount? That would be very bad luck if you want to see snow. But nonetheless, some main points here is that it's about a 24-hour storm. It's not going to take up a massive geographic area, but it's going to get areas that are so unused to this. And this is going to be a storm that kids are going to remember for several years. And there's that potential to see that snow all the way into northern Florida, including Tallahassee and Niceville, and maybe even Panama City and Destin. As you see here, those chances are 60% or greater. Here's the chance for 3 inches or more of snow. It's not great, but still 50-50 for the coasts of the Carolinas here, more in the mountains, as you might imagine, as well. And then the 6-inch potential is actually looking fairly decent for the coastal empire of Georgia, for the low country of South Carolina, and for down eastern parts of North Carolina, including the Wilmington area. So what the European is showing us here is that even though there's going to be a cutoff where very little happens, as this system moves to the Atlantic side, it does have the possibility of enhancing precipitation rates, meaning snow can come down harder as it's leaving, and the areas that could get it are areas that got hit hard in December 1989, right before Christmas. So again, this is a very interesting setup. So I do want to show you what the models are showing right now. Here's the GFS, and you can see, and this is not an official forecast, but it's got some pretty nasty totals here. When you get up to College Station, up to the north of Houston and over to the Piney Woods region, as much as 15, 16 inches of snow in 24 hours. That's assuming everything comes together here. It may or may not be this much, but doesn't have much for North Texas, and it doesn't have much south of Houston. But an inch in Houston will be significant enough. Interestingly, it's got stuff in San Antonio and maybe all the way down to the coastal bend, places that got hit by Hurricane Beryl. So that is the GFS model. I am going to show you other models here. We'll start with the Europe. Whoops. That was totally my fault. We'll start with the European here real quick. And you can see the European actually dings Houston pretty good here with up to 10 inches of snow. And that would be a very major event for Houston. A couple of inches in San Antonio, but next to nothing in the DFW area. So it's farther south, but it is intense near the Gulf Coast. The European has snow down to Laredo and almost all the way down to the lower Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. The Canadian model from earlier looks similar to the GFS here. It's got very heavy amounts around Houston, up to a foot, and up to 13 inches here in the Piney Woods region. So that's what we're looking at here, just some pretty crazy totals. Looking farther east, Louisiana, Mississippi, this is a significant amount of snow coming, 6 inches or more. It's showing 8 inches in Baton Rouge, 5 in Slidell, 4 in New Orleans, much less, though, on the West Bank. Homa even showing some accumulation, Mobile, a little bit of accumulation. So here's the GFS. You can see Atlanta's got about an inch, Birmingham half an inch, Jackson about a couple of inches. So there will be a very sharp cutoff here. So that's the GFS. Here's the European, and again, it's farther south and has our heaviest snow near New Orleans and near New Iberia, near Pensacola and Destin. Got a few inches there, so less than the GFS. Here's the Canadian model, and the Canadian is really intense here. I think it's overdone, but we'll have to see. South Louisiana is showing a foot of snow in some places, which has never really happened unless you look at February 1899. No one was around then, so who knows. But it's got a lot more snow here, and there's one other model I was going to try to show you all. I guess I don't have it up yet, but southeast, here's the GFS. And again, it's got more ice here, so our totals are pretty low on the actual coast, but even 6 inches around Wilmington and Hampstead, and up to a foot here in down eastern parts of North Carolina. Raleigh-Durham is showing about 5 inches, more in Wake Lawn and Zebulon, less when we get back to Durham and certainly the Triad, and even 5 to 6 inches from Richmond over into southeastern Virginia, as you can see here. And even a few inches up the Chesapeake into South Jersey and central Delaware. That's the GFS. Here's the European. It's a lot flatter, but it does have accumulating snow over the eastern Carolinas. So the GFS brings that warm layer aloft and gives us ice, whereas the European says it's going to be pretty much all snow. But this would rip off most of Raleigh and Charlotte and upstate South Carolina and keep all that snow mostly to your east. And the Canadian has definitely been hitting this area good over several models, and it is showing potentially 16 inches of snow around North Myrtle Beach, 14 around Bald Head Island. And I think it's overdone. So if I'm making a forecast, I'm kind of liking where the GFS is right now, kind of in between the other models. But again, we've got a lot of time for that still to change. Finally, we'll talk about the cold. It is coming. We've been talking about it here for days. We're looking at temperatures Monday afternoon that'll be in the teens around DC and dropping into the single digits at night. Could be as cold as 25 to 30 below zero Tuesday and Wednesday mornings in parts of northern West Virginia, western PA, eastern Ohio. So very cold air in place here. Teens around Raleigh. It's even got 15 degrees around Houston, Texas here Wednesday morning. And then temperatures will slowly come back up, but it's going to take time for that to happen. And it's still pretty cold even next weekend, although not as extreme. And we may have more cold coming at the end of the month of January as well for the northern tier. Here's a look at Texas, and take a look at our temperatures here on Tuesday morning, all the way down to 31 degrees in Laredo, 27 in Houston, 24 in Dallas, single digits in the panhandles, of course, teens in Oklahoma. And it's pretty cold as well. If we get snow on the ground for Wednesday morning, temperatures will slowly come back up after that. We're flirting with the 60s offshore at the oil rigs and 20s and 30s inland, so quite a gradient here. And finally, I'll show you all Florida here. And you can see it's warm on Sunday, but then heading south very quickly on Sunday night, and Monday morning temperatures will be in the 40s down to I-4, 50s in South Florida, 20s across northern Florida, low 30s in northeastern Florida, same for South Georgia. Take a look here at Wednesday morning. This is when it could be precipitating. We're talking teens in the Panhandle, 20s in Tallahassee and the Big Bend, near 30 in places like Gainesville and Jacksonville, and upper 30s in Orlando and Tampa, and even 40s in Southwest Florida. So this is our coldest air mass of the season, and it certainly is looking brutal. So we could look at models all day. Just want to give you all kind of an idea of what the setup is looking like today. I'll have another update coming tomorrow with more on this. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. I'll chat with you all again tomorrow. I thank you for your time. I'm praying for your health and your safety. I am a Christian, and I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Psalms 46:1. If we can go to God with our requests, he provides us the strength to get through things every day because of his sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, so that if we chose to follow Jesus, we could live one day eternally in heaven with him. And that is the good news I wanted to encourage you with today. And you may not believe that, and that's fine. You're still welcome here. You may not have expected that coming from me because this is a science report, but first and foremost, I'm a Christian. What I do on earth is just a calling from God, and that is helping you all with the weather, helping my family, helping friends, and encouraging one another. So I hope everybody has a great Friday night, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. God bless you.